Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. This new Abyss 12 and version 4.7 is absolutely one of the craziest and hardest Abyss 12s to date. In fact, it was so hard that I even had to break one little rule that I usually make for these Abyss 12 videos. So what did I mean when I said I broke one little rule that I usually have for these videos? Generally, I always try to complete these new Abyss 12s with only 4-star characters and only 4-star weapons. And fortunately, I didn't have to break the second rule. However, I did break the first rule. I actually did have to use a 5-star character to complete it within a reasonable amount of time, and that 5-star character being Mona. Let's be real, when it comes to 4-star Hydro applicators, Candace and Barbara are just honestly not going to cut it, so I had to bust out the big guns, the standard banner 5-star Hydro character Mona. I did try to choose one of the more free-to-play friendly 5-star characters to use being a standard banner, but of course any of the other Hydro characters will honestly do much better than Mona did here. However, that is definitely something to keep in mind. I also did a really quick 5-minute speedrun as well, just so I could include the usual speedrun section for this Abyss 12. Now, let's take a look at the teams and builds that I use for this. For the top half, I fortunately didn't have to change the team at all, and this was just an overloaded team, standard Chevreuse overloaded team. And this is my build for 12-1 specifically, because I actually had to change my builds throughout, and I accidentally had the Crescent Pike equipped for 12-1 and still managed. I mean, 12-1 wasn't really the issue. The overloaded team wasn't the one that was struggling, but I switched it over to the Favonius after I realized I had the wrong weapon. So that's just kind of an oopsie on my part. However, standard drill, we have Xiangling and Fischl here for the overloaded team. And then let's take a look at the second half team, which is actually going to be a double Hydro Hyper Bloom team. And this one was really tricky for me to find a decent 4-star only team. Although, you know, Mona is now, I guess, the 5-star character that I ended up using because I needed that extra Hydro application. She's built to do a little damage, and she is at Constellation 6, but I did not utilize her Constellation 6. She's basically played as a Constellation any Mona because we don't really care about her damage that much. Mainly it's almost entirely for the Hydro application. Then we have Xingqiu, who is Xingqiu, and you know, he's the one that applies a lot of Hydro, the best and basically only 4-star Hydro character that we actually have. And anyway, so we start off against these 4 Dorito bots. If you don't know how they work, they do go invisible after some time, and you can use overloaded or just brute force through them. In this case, I am just going to brute force through them. You see I got hit here, but it doesn't really matter that much as long as you finish off the first wave with this first rotation. Everything else, you know, doesn't really matter for that. So because you're kind of bottlenecked by Xiangling's time for her ultimate, so we can see that we managed to use her burst here. We have a Rune Guard over here, then we have 2 Rune Drakes here. There is some RNG in terms of the Rune Drake AI. Sometimes they end up splitting up and one walks backwards, one walks forward, at which point the attempt is dead. So we can see here that I'm just trying to kind of group them together, keep them close together while trying to distribute the damage a bit, and we managed to get another Xiangling's ultimate up in time. And then we have 2 Pokemon trainers. I think I found actually sticking to the left side of the Wind Girl to be a little bit better, but this run that I actually did manage to 3-star it worked out fine with me sticking on the other girl. But I don't really think it matters that much. If you guys, yeah, in this case, I got really bad RNG with it where the bow archer girl did a jump back into this corner, which is why I tend to like to stay on the other side of the bow archer girl. But somehow the other one died, and this one is also going to go down at about 840. So 840 was the time that I needed to complete this in order to have any shot of 3-starring this one. So we can see here that I opened up with Mona's skill as well as Elemental Burst to just start chipping away at the Pyro Abyss Mage shields. In this case, I'm actually not going to use Dendro Traveler's Burst for a couple reasons. 1, because it often just spontaneously combusts, and 2, because I need to actually save it for the next wave in order to do some real damage to the Abyss Electors, because otherwise, you know, Dendro Traveler's Burst isn't going to be up, and then we're not going to have a good time. Now, I didn't really find any grouping methods to be effective against those Pyro Mages either, so their placement actually makes it really awkward for these characters to apply Hydro to them. Now, anyway, now we actually need to do some actual damage, not just pyro damage to pyro shield. So that's why Hyper Bloom here was my go-to method of trying to deal damage. You can see here that I'm trying to knock the two Abyss Lectors down, so that way they are kind of grouped up together. And I'm struggling to finish this last one off, but we did manage to squeak it out just in time. And now Mona is the MVP for breaking these shields thanks to her dash as well as her normal catalyst attacks doing hydro. And of course we're going to use Xingqiu as well to help with that Mona's skill every time it's off cooldown. And we are just finally able to burn through these pyro shields, because without Mona, when I was trying Candace and Barbara, it was just not pretty. I was not able to bust their shields in similar amount of time in comparison. So yeah, lots of damage, I guess. Hyper Blooms flying everywhere. Some Electro Charge also helping out. And we managed to actually 3-star this with only a few seconds left. So normally in most Abyss 12 clears that I do this, we usually have a bit more time. But for this one, this was just barely cutting it close. So I actually had to change my team, which is super rare for this. And I guess I had Kalei on the prototype Crescent, which is incorrect. Here, my brain is freezing because I'm like, oh god, I used the wrong weapon this whole time and the wrong build. I had double Deepwood. I meant to put Kalei on a sub DPS Gilded Dreams build, but unfortunately I had the wrong build. But either way, even with the wrong build, we still managed to 3-star this one. Well, obviously, since, you know, I'm showing this run to you guys, so it's very likely that I 3-starred it. But you can see here that I actually redid Abyss 12-1 to refill the energy for this entire team. So this way I could squeak out as much time as possible. And, you know, I had to redo it anyway because I had to switch teammates, because Mona is not going to be very helpful against the next two in comparison to another Dendro character and a sub DPS spread DPS Dendro character, in this case for Kalei, since I built her to, well, in this case I just built her for whatever. I'm not even sure what her build is, but I did intend to build her to actually do some real damage with spread. But anyway, Kagumenki, you guys know it, you guys love it. It does the same thing every time, and we're able to 2-rotation it with Xiangling as well as Visual Overload. And my Shivers is at Constellation 6, because this Abyss 12 has a ton of HP, a ton of waves. If you don't have the proper gear or, you know, some 5. Anyway, this part, you see I ran in between the two samurai guys to actually kind of get them to move towards me. And this way you have a slightly better grouping at the very beginning. And you can, again, these samurai guys, you want to kill them at the same time. Otherwise, the surviving samurai guy will heal up. In this case, we managed to kill them both at roughly the same time, which is very helpful. Now, these mechs, if they start to just get constantly knocked back, you actually want to give them a little bit of breathing room in order for them to reface you, so that way when you knock them back, they actually go backwards, because otherwise they keep getting knocked back over and over, so they just keep stepping in the same direction regardless of what direction you're facing. Most enemies, when they get knocked back, they end up, you know, being pushed away from you, but in those mechs cases, they get knocked back, and if they're continuously knocked back, they get knocked back in the direction that they are, well, you know, opposite of the direction that they're facing. I hope that made sense. That probably didn't make sense, but I'm trying to talk as fast as I can to explain how that works, because it's a little bit convoluted. However, we have these two Geo Rift Hounds. There's no room for a Geo team, at least not with my current setup, and not with a free-to-play friendly build. Geo damage does enhance the lower the resistance of these Geo Rift Hounds, and they also, you know, get more aggressive. However, in this case, we managed to just chew through them with Hyper Bloom. And now we have 3 different types of robots. We have the small one, the big construction one, as well as this one. I find I try to chip away at the big one more than the others, because that one has the most HP. However, we can see that we do have a reasonable amount of time, although I think I cut this one close as well. I mean, all of these ones are really close because there are just so many waves in this, which is absolutely brutal. There's 4 waves in 12-2-2, which is the one you guys are watching right now, and you can see here that it's getting pretty close. But we only have 1 mech left, and we actually managed to squeak out the clear with just 13 seconds left on the 3-star time. So pretty rough clear. Up next, we have 12-3, and I actually switched Kalei over to the proper build with the stringless in order for her to do more damage, as well as the Gilded Dreams. More of a DPS set for her. And we also have Visual, who I switched over to the prototype Crescent because I don't like using too many, you know, Refinement 5 of the same type of weapon, even though stringless would probably be better on her here. But this Simon was not really the issue for this run. But you can see this rotation. My goal is just to kind of maximize Oz and Xiangling's Pyro NATO damage with that rotation because A Simon's invincible anyway. Now we go for the break on these, one of the, you know, constructs. And after it's broken, you just have to hit A Simon with Electro or whatever. And then the towers apply Dendro to it, which apply Quicken to it. And therefore, A Simon gets knocked down. You want to apply Quicken. In this case, you don't have to have a Quicken team. However, you definitely want an Electro team to really help you out there, because that's what will end up, you know, leading to it being knocked down in this case. So we can see that we're just doing a ton of damage to it after it gets knocked down. Thanks to the overloaded team as well as Fischl doing a lot of damage. This was a bit of a slower run out of the attempts that I tried, but fortunately we managed to have a better 12-3-2 in this case. So I toss out Kale's ultimate immediately, so that way it goes in the center. And over here you can see that I run over to this Pyro Fatui mage, so that way it will jump back into its friends, and we do a lot of big damage right there to all of them. And this one will also jump back when you approach it one single time. However, I guess in this case it didn't jump back, and we managed to knock him up and clear out the first wave in one single rotation. Now for this one, oh my gosh, I died so many times against this wave. Not only do we have the overloadeds and stuff, and the consecrated beasts are back, and they just do so much damage. It's absolutely insane. And in this case, consecrated beasts, you do want to pay attention to when they drop their little add-on thing. But because they have a lot of HP and they're super dangerous and aggressive. But anyway, I'm trying to keep them kind of grouped up, and I'm trying to hit the seahorses with Dendro, so that way we can remove their Electro Shields. And once their Electro Shields are removed, now you are able to apply Dendro to them, and thus you are able to apply Hyper Bloom to them. And I am trying to kind of stick towards the seahorses. But you see, that's the little thing that it drops. You need to hit it with 6, I believe, any element attacks or 1 fire attack. But just hit it with any element, honestly. And I'm pretty sure the vulture is going to die, which it did. So I went over to finish off the seahorse. Now we have 2 crabs as well as the scorpion. And the scorpion is very, very dangerous. These consecrated beasts are some of the most dangerous enemies in the game. Now the crabs are super annoying, and I didn't really realize this about them. But after you break their pyro shield, they just sit back and literally do nothing. Like, look at that crab that's back in the distance while I'm trying to take out the scorpion. And I'm just going to ignore the other crab right now because I actually wanted to approach me. So, yeah, and I was worried there that Dendro Traveler's burst would explode. But fortunately, you know, every time you drop down Dendro Traveler's burst, try to tag it with Hydro. And if not Hydro, settle for Electro. You see there that the scorpion also dropped his little add-on, where you can break it with, in this case, an Electro attack will break it instantly, or just, you know, Pyro or any element attacks will break it in 6 hits. And we managed to actually 3-star this. Okay, so for the speedrun for this, I just did literally a 5-minute speedrun because I figured, hey, Neuvillette can just completely dump through this with the very simple spin to win tech, because everything is just kind of spawned all over the place on this chamber specifically. So with the spin to win, he cleared this out in just 17 seconds. And up next, we have the second one where it's just the Kagumenki. Now, Neuvillette is actually not the best Constellation 6 speedrunner for this thing, because he can't instantly do around 1,000,000 damage. He has to, you know, kind of wait for his little ticks to happen. So yeah, unfortunately, you know, characters like Arlecchino will be able to do Kagumenki a couple seconds faster, but this is literally a 5-minute speedrun that I did just so I could have the speedrun segment for you guys, because I always like including these just for fun. And since I already spent so long on the just, you know, 4-star plus Mona run, I figured I would just, you know, do this one really quick. So yeah, here you go, A Simon, you know, literally just sitting duck and able to clean it out before it goes invisible. Now, this Abyss 12 was one of the most difficult Abyss 12s that I can remember. An absolutely chunky Abyss 12. And in 12-1, there are literally this many enemies. Holy cow, you have to actually scroll to even see them all. And 7 entire waves. No joke, 7 waves of enemies in 12-1, which is the most waves that I'm aware of that I can think of off the top of my head, which is an absolutely insane number of waves. And one of these waves happens to be the 2 Pyro Abyss Lectors, which if you know how they work, you can see they take absolutely forever to kill thanks to their super, super thick Pyro Shields, which is why I needed to bring a 5-star character. I'm sorry, guys. I had to cheat. I brought Mona to break through those Pyro Shields. So yeah, you guys can see that Hydro damage does really, really well in the second half. If you have Neuvillette, he is absolutely going to chew through this second half with not an issue in the world. But if you don't have any Hydro characters or 5-star Hydro characters, you are going to be in for a world of pain for the second half. If you do have Chlorond or, I guess Cyno, Kaching, they could probably do pretty well in the top half as well. As you can see, that Aggravate was very friendly for this, and probably like a Raiden Overload team with Chevreuse will do extremely well. Just Electro in the top half will do really well. Yeah, Pyro Electro, or honestly, most elements will do well, as long as you just have any way to deal with the algorithm of Semi and Transient Matrix's invisibility. Now, the bottom half, as I mentioned, is where things get really, really messy. In particular, these Pyro Shields are really, really a big pain in the patootie, so if you've got Nuvolite, he is the GOAT for this. He will absolutely just shred through it. You guys can see that it's mainly a DPS check. If you can see, this chamber has a total of 5.819 million hit points. That is how chonky this part is, and that is also why they put a very easy first half with just the Magu Kenki, because you're going to need to chew through an entire 5.8 million hit points worth of damage. Now, fortunately, if you have good AoE, then this will become much more manageable, but without good AoE, in my case, Hyper Boom, it was a bit stressful. There's not much else to really say about this chamber besides just do more damage. Now, 12-3, again, a Simon. I don't think I need to talk too much about it, but in terms of both the Consecrated Beast, they both drop that little thing where you can just break with various elemental attacks, and after you break it, it will become stunned. I don't remember if it loses some HP, but here is how it works on the screen. So do keep that in mind if the Consecrated Beasts are also pretty chonky. They have nearly 1 million hit points, and just to rub salt in the wound, they actually have enhanced 40% resistances, I believe, to all elements, although the Vulture will resist Pyro by a bit more, and the Scorpion will resist Electro by a bit more. So obviously the bottom half is not Pyro favored with the Fatui Pyro Skirmisher, Fatui Pyro Agents, as well as the Pyro Shields. You absolutely are going to be relying on Hydro for the second half. So yeah, this is more of an element check and DPS check for Abyss 12, and it's also why, because we just don't have any good 4-star Hydro characters outside of Xingqiu, that's why it's pretty difficult to actually, get the job done with 4-star only characters. But I am sure some Giga Chat out there will be able to do it. I wasn't able to do it in the roughly 3 hours of trying, which is definitely much longer than usual for my typical Abyss 12 showcase videos. I generally am able to do them in 1 to 2 hours, but this one took me 3 hours to actually pull off in comparison to usual. So there you go. Let me know what you think about this Abyss 12. It is getting really hard again, although I do think that thanks to power creep in Fontaine, if you do have a lot of these featured 5-star banner characters, you will probably have a pretty good time. But if you don't have any decent Hydro characters, you are going to be in for a world of pain. So let me know what you guys cleared this Abyss 12 with down in the comments below. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Win to Lose, signing out.